Yosh! Japanese pen shootout! And today we're going to be having a look at these two pens. And please don't consider that introduction to be racist. That was not meant in any disrespectful manner. I just really love Japanese samurai movies, and people always shout there. What do we got here? Well. Platinum 3776 with music nib, Salem 1911 large with zoom nib. Why do people want to have a shootout? Because it was requested. Well, black pens, gold highlights, looks classic. Okay, that's one reason. Another reason is the nibs. Both nibs are specialty nibs. We've got a music nib there, and we've got a zoom nib here. Zoom is a thing that Sailor has invented. Music nib is not something Platinum has invented. And yes, you can get different nibs for these pens, but this is what I have. This is what people wanted to see. This is what you get. So, there we go. I have separate reviews of these pens on my channel. If you want more in-depth views at either pen, feel free to check those out. The Platinum 3776, not the biggest of pens. It's a bit skinny. But the one thing that this pen has and that I absolutely love is a music nib. I tried to show you that in the area where I disassemble them, but my camera didn't really pick up all the details, and I know that my webcam will. Just look at that. It's wonderful, beautiful, and this has 3 tines. That's what a music nib has usually. You have 2 breather holes, 2 slits, and therefore 3 tines. Now, if you think this is extra flexy, forget it. No flex whatsoever. There are flexible music nibs, but due to the gold alloy, it's 14K. This one doesn't flex. And, you know, that's pretty much all there's to it. Sip of water. Not big. Almost disappears in my hands, but you can post it, then it works fine. You get a nice little converter. I think I got that with the pen, but it's been a while since I bought this. I'm not absolutely sure. Cool pen. The nib, this music nib, is super smooth. I do not kid when I say that this is one of the smoothest nibs I own. So if you're after that excessive smoothness, this is good. If you want line variation, you basically get an italic nib. So you will get line variation. And you get a very consistent ink flow due to those 2 breather holes and the 2 slits. So that's all very good, and it should be made for writing music notes, you know, staff notation. I cannot do that. I cannot comment on that. It's that simple. Sailor 1911 large. There's also a Sailor 1911. The large isn't a huge pen. Don't expect it's an oversized pen just because it's called large. It's just larger than the regular 1911. But it's by no means a huge pen. Yes, it's bigger than the music that's 3776, but it's not huge. It's decently shaped, decently sized. I think it's about 146 sized, if that means anything. The zoom nib is fantastic. 21 karat gold. That's a lot of gold. Nice, soft, springy. And the zoom nib, what is so special about a zoom nib? Well, if you hold it like this, straight angle, you get a very thin line, and the more you go down, the broader the line gets, up to a point where it's almost like a felt-tipped pen. Quite interesting. Converter, I think actually I got that with the pen. I didn't have to purchase it separately, but I had to pick it up, so I'm not sure whether it comes with the pen usually, but I got it in a fountain pen store. These converters are nice, but they don't hold a lot of ink. They're quite narrow. They run out quickly, especially because this nib is a freaking gusher. This is like a fire hose of ink on the paper. It's crazy. So that's a brief rundown of the 2 pens. I'm going to show you how to take them apart, and then I'm going to do writing samples side by side. I think that's what's the most interesting part of the shootouts. If you want to see them side by side, then you'll notice that the 1911 is a bit larger than the 3776. It's also definitely a bit fatter, and if you cap the 2, then the 1911 is just a bit bigger too, though the difference is not as pronounced there. This is the 1911, that's the 3776. That's all there's to it. I think we're going to have to disassemble these, write a bit with them, see what happens, and that's all there's to it. Hope that's going to be useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, so here we have the Platinum 3776 with music nib, and here we have the Sailor 1911 large with zoom nib. Let's just have a look at the sort of close up. Let's see if I can actually make that work a bit. You can really see those 2 breather holes and slits, and then the 3 tines, I believe. I'm not sure whether this is really going to focus well. No, he doesn't really like that, my camera, but yeah, there we go. 2 breather holes, 2 slits, 3 tines. And the zoom, well, it's maybe a little bit less spectacular, but it's definitely a beautiful nib. And you see there's something interesting going on with the tipping, which allows that those different angles and the line variation. Okay, now this part of the shootout, as you know, I like to show you how to take these pens apart. I think I have done disassembly line entries on both of the pens, but just a quick rundown. This one, the 3776, is the hardest to take apart. The converter is fairly easy. Just make sure the piston is about halfway in there, grab the reservoir and grab that metal ring. You can just unscrew the metal ring, take off the turning knob, pull out the piston, apply a bit of silicone grease there if you want for a good seal and smooth operation, as well as on those threads. Then take that little plastic ring, slide it back on there, slide the whole thing back into the ink reservoir, put the turning knob back on there, and then screw that ring back in place, and you should be fine. So that's easy. Now the problem is the section. You can take the nib and feed out if you want to, and sometimes I like to do so just because, you know, it's so much easier to clean, and if you've used a somewhat aggressive ink, so to speak, it can be useful to do so. However, it's not that easy, and they are just friction fit. It's nothing fancy. The only problem is the fit is extremely tight. So when you try this with your bare hands, you may not be successful. I was successful here because I've done it 2 or 3 times now, and then the fit gets a little bit looser. But if you can't do it, get some of this stuff. You use that to line kitchen drawers, or some people put it under their carpets. It's rubbery, it's nice, it gives you a nice grip. And if you want to use that, then it's best if you hold the nib about there. So you don't have to squeeze this, and you don't want to squeeze this bit, because then you'll make it tighter. So I always try to grab it right behind the shoulders and then just pull. Don't squeeze, just pull. Okay, now when you're ready to put this back in there, you have to be careful, and I have no clue whether my camera is going to pick this up, but on the inside, yeah, you see it right there. If you look at the very top, I'll use this nib to point, you see that there is a sort of white thing in there, and it ends at that point. You see that? Well, this broad area, that's where the nib goes, and this white little line, that's like a crescent shape, that's where the feed goes. So you have to be very careful, otherwise you will not really get a good fit, and then you may get leakage and you may force stuff and break stuff. So roughly align the shoulders of the nib to the shoulders of the feed. Oh, and by the way, this is a very cool thing that I have to show you. There are actually 2 ink channels. You see that? To accommodate those 2 slits. I think that's quite cool. Someone once asked me, and at that point I couldn't take this apart, so I couldn't really verify it yet. Okay, the dogs are going wild. There are probably some ballpoint users on the perimeter once again. They keep trying, I don't know why. Fortunately, they never really make it through the landmine, so that's okay, don't worry. Okay, I align this. And then this should be an easy thing to slide in. If you have a lot of resistance, then the alignment between the nib and feed and that crescent in there is probably not good. Okay, well, try to make sure the feed is in the middle of the nib. As I said, I mean, especially with this, I mean, 2 slits, make sure you get the alignment correct. So only take it apart if you really have to. I wouldn't do this with this pen all the time. Okay, we have that. Now we have that Sailor 1911. Well, that's a lot simpler to take apart. The converter is very standard. You just unscrew that metal ring,
and then you can take off the piston turning knob, take out the piston and that guiding ring. Apply a little bit of silicone grease there, put some on the threads, put this back in here, and once you're ready, just put the ring, just slide that back in there. As I said, I think I have a disassembly line video on this if you want to see that in more detail, and then just put that back in place. And if you have that, nib and feed are friction fit. You can pull them out straightly, clean them, and once you're ready, put them back in. The nib sort of slots in place onto the feed, so that will make it easy to put it back. And then you will see that in the section there is a, I don't believe it should, no, there are two little ridges. One is for the nib and one is for the feed, and I have the strong suspicion that this will only, yeah, I don't think it really matters which end you put where. Oh wait, no, it does matter because I can't get it in the other way around. However, I don't really see a difference between the two ridges. Oh wait, yeah, okay, sorry. This is an actual ridge, that's just a flat bit, and that actual ridge should go on the underside of the feed for that breather, that air replacement channel. So I align that well, and then everything should just slide in place. You'll hear a couple of clicks, and that's it. And you put the converter back in, screw the barrel back in place, cap the pen, and you're all ready. Let's ink these up and then do a writing sample. Okay, boys and girls, I have inked up the pens, and now the time has come to write. So what we have here is the Platinum 3776 music nib. The ink is Waterman Florida Blue, now known as Serenity. And let's do a bit of writing too now that we're at it. You'll notice that the music nib is definitely an italic, a broad, flat nib, which will give a lot of line variation. Here we have the Sailor 11. Now, as I explained, this nib is made to give you a line variation depending on the angle under which you hold it. So I'm now trying to hold this under the same angle I held the 3776 zoom nib. One thing you will notice straight away, I think, is that this nib is much more saturated, super wet, and if you combine that with a fairly small converter, I didn't fill it up all the way, but even so, it's fairly narrow, doesn't hold a lot of ink. I can easily burn through the ink in this pen in an hour if I do a lot of writing. So that's you know, it's interesting, and as you can see, I mean really super wet. I've been talking for a while now. That is still wet, so that pen is a gusher. Okay, I'm not going to do fast writing. Oh, I got the wrong one. Here we go. Bit of wetness. As you can see, beautiful patch of ink, and relatively dry. I mean, it is not a dry pen, but compared to this one, you can see this bit was already dry when I tried to wipe it out. Look at this. This is just like a fire hose. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I'm just talking a bit, and then this is still super wet, and this is just gushing. So if you like wet pens, so even parts of the writing are still wet. It's really amazing. Okay, line variation. Now this is where things get interesting, because the music nib, although it has 3 tines, is made of a stiff alloy. This is the most pressure I'd like to put on there, and this is no pressure. You see there is not a whole lot of difference. the tines do not really open up. It's not like a super flexi pen, even though it has 3 tines. The line variation you get here is merely because of the italic shape of the nib. That gives you variation, not the actual flexiness of the pen. Now in the zoom nib, things are completely different. There you get very thin lines when you hold the pen at 90 degrees. Now I'm going to move that angle down. And as you can see, you get down to a very broad line, especially when compared to the completely 90-degree angle. And then, that was no pressure. If you add pressure, you can get to a super broad line and a lot of line variation that is almost like writing with a felt-tipped pen. So, which pen is the best? Well, I can't say. First of all, there's a lot of nibs for the 1911, and there are other nibs for the 3776 too. Comparing just these two with a music nib and a zoom nib, the zoom nib is not for everyone. Depending on your writing angle, it can just be too broad. I think the platinum nib is more suitable for everyday writing. And it is super smooth, very pleasant to use, but so is the 1911 nib. If you like a somewhat bigger pen, then you will definitely like the 1911, although you can see the difference is not that big, it's more the girth of the pen, and I think uncapped, you see the difference is a little bit more pronounced. Two fantastic pens that I absolutely love using. And which one you pick, I would say, really depends on the purpose of why you buy it, what you want to do with it. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.